Triple H is one of the most divisive people in wrestling today. Far as beloved as he is amongst hardcore WWE fans, particularly since becoming head of creative and chief content officer in 2022, he draws much less enthusiasm from critics who can't quite figure out what it is exactly about his patient brand of booking that connects with people. Paul Levesque has seemingly spent the bulk of his career working his way towards this role, but heavy is the head that wears the crown, even if the throne has been made of composite parts of his own big dumb logo since he used WrestleMania 22's main event to audition for Conan the Barbarian. To reach the job that he craved, Triple H was the industry's chief pariah more times than he was world champion, which, for those of you who have been through enough therapy to erase those memories, was a lot. He might have been WWE's creative savior a couple of times across the past decade, but he also pushed back as many skeletons into the closet as hard as he pushed himself throughout the much maligned reign of terror. I'm Andy from WhatCulture, and here are 16 things WWE wants you to forget about Triple H. Number 16, his disappearing DX skits. Ah yes, DX. The group that gave us moments that wrestling fans still talk about today, and a whole bunch of stuff that WWE now pretends never happened. Take the Nation of Domination parody as one. More on that train wreck later on, but spoiler alert, it hasn't exactly aged like a fine wine. Unless the wine in question was left open in the sun since 1998, but that's just the start. DX's so-called State of the Union address? Well, that one was just wrestling attempting satire. What we got instead were slurs with a punchline attached. Absolutely groundbreaking stuff. Fast forward to 2026, DX are back, and this time the jokes are mostly homophobic, because nothing screams rebellion like mocking marginalized people in the mid-2000s. How very edgy. Oh, and let's not forget their reunion, either. Because what better way to celebrate than by teasing a sexual assault angle in the locker room? That's just comedy gold, Triple H. Even Triple H's career-defining moment, the one everyone remembers, comes with the small print that, it was basically him bragging about drugging and marrying Stephanie McMahon at a drive-thru while she was unconscious. Peak romance. And the best part? For ages, WWE deliberately kept it vague whether or not Stephanie was in on the plan from day one, or if she was just thinking, I might as well stick with a guy who tricked me into marriage. But wait, there's more. That same month, X-Pac won Tori from Kane, as in Tori was treated like a PS5 on eBay, except the weekend away prize heavily implied that she was his to now, enjoy? And the payoff? She chose to stay with the abuser instead of the supposed good guy. Lovely. So yeah, different times, blah blah blah, but is it any wonder WWE would rather roll out clips of the DX tank again instead of, well, any of that? Number 15, his big punishment wasn't really that bad. In the 1999 Sunday Night Heat interview with Jim Ross that served as the latest attempt to get Triple H over the mid-card hump, the game said he was sick to his stomach by the way he was treated after the Clique's curtain call house show embrace at Madison Square Garden in 1996. A nothing situation now was an everything situation back then, as babyfaces Shawn Michaels and Razor Ramon linked arms with heels Diesel and Hunter Hearst Helmsley following the headlining match between HBK and Big Daddy Cool as a farewell to Kevin Nash and Scott Hall before they departed for WCW. It was given the nod of approval from Vince McMahon before the show, but the infuriated locker room response resulted in Hunter, the only person WWE could realistically punish, taking the bullet. For years and years, the generational burial was spoken of as if the company were hanging him out to dry week after week with no end in sight until the wily and determined King of Kings gutted his way back to the promised land. The truth was a lot less dramatic. Yes, Triple H lost King of the Ring, but he was back on the throne literally 12 months later, and it's not as though 1996's King of the Ring winner turned out to be a bad choice, is it? In the meantime, Triple H lost on house shows for 5 months, like most heels do, won TV squashes, was involved in a major storyline with Mr. Perfect over the summer, and was back on pay-per-view and winning the Intercontinental title by October. WWE had neither the roster depth nor the inclination to treat Hunter worse than any of the other mid-carders that weren't exactly pulling up trees at the box office. The idea that he was buried for months on end is a complete myth, and we should throw it in the bin. Number 14. Am I f***ing going over? We now head to the much-missed PowerSlam magazine for a tidbit of life working under the thumb or sledgehammer of Triple H during his relentless stranglehold on Monday Night Raw between 2002 and 2005. Speaking to respected writer Matthew Randazzo, an anonymous creative team member shared a tale of trying to get an idea greenlit by the game and it not going all that well. The needlessly cruel process went as followed, and I'm going to quote all of this. Triple H grabbed the script, flipped through it, but did not read it, and he asked me point blank, am I f***ing going over? This first time that I delivered the script to him, he did indeed win his match, so I said yes. Then he politely gave the script back to me without reading it and said, that's all I need to know. And he walked back into the McMahon locker room. A few months later, I delivered another Raw script to him and it was the same routine. He nonchalantly flipped through it and said, am I f***ing going over? This time, however, he was going to lose his match by disqualification. He would keep his title. I said to him, well, sort of. Then Hunter froze. He said, what do you f***ing mean, sort of? I said, you lose the match via DQ, so you still keep the title. What page? He growled. After I told Hunter the page number this occurred on, he ripped that page out, threw the rest of the script to the floor in a rage, and slammed the door in my face. Needless to say, the next day during the agents meeting, the script somehow changed, and now Triple H won his match cleanly. This was hardly an isolated incident. A truly terrible time to watch WWE Weekly. It was all about the game. Just like it was nearly a decade later when a star emerged that was bright enough to boot him into retirement once and for all. Well, unless he happened to be a skinny fat ass. Number 13. His role in the destruction of the Summer of Punk. In 2025, CM Punk and Triple H are all smiles. Handshakes, hugs, water under the bridge, PR boringness. But rewind to 2011, these two couldn't stand each other at all. When Punk came back to WWE in 2023, he even admitted it. Off microphone, but caught by the cameras, he said that he wasn't back to make friends, just money. Translation, I'm not getting emotionally invested again, thank you very much. Which is fair enough, considering how his first post-pipe bomb run got flushed straight down the drain. Remember that era? Punk beats Cena in Chicago, has the wrestling world at his feet, and then immediately it all collapses. Because apart from Cena, Punk wasn't really allowed to beat anybody. Imagine conquering the champ, then going right back to losing to every other so-called babyface in sight. How revolutionary, such great storytelling. And oh yes, the storyline, the power struggle saga. You know, that thrilling tale where the only guy who came out looking good was, surprise, surprise, Triple H. It started with Punk and Hunter throwing shade over whether or not Kevin Nash randomly texting himself into the angle was Hunter's idea. Then Nash got injured, which meant that Punk had to face, yup, Triple H. And of course, Hunter wouldn't play the heel. He won the match, and cherry on top, forced Punk to play nice as his ally afterwards. So yeah, when Punk said that WWE made him sick, he certainly wasn't kidding at the time. Number 12. He failed to sign the Elite in 2018. Imagine if, in late 2018, rather than going on to create All Elite Wrestling alongside Tony Khan, Kenny Omega, Cody Rhodes, the Young Bucks, and Hangman Page all instead signed for WWE. The wrestling timeline as we know it changes irreversibly, but it would be one Triple H would have had overseen had he gotten his way around the negotiating table. The infamous McMahon family apology segment on Monday Night Raw was even allegedly part of the deal. The old guard were trying to explain away WWE not being good enough ahead of bringing in an entire group of game changers in one go to prove that they were committed to the change. They even blamed everything on poor old Baron Corbin. It wasn't his fault. The offer was a good one. All members would come in on good money and be given an unprecedented 3-month opt-out clause if they weren't happy with the creative their characters had been given. All of them would debut on the main roster, apart from Adam Page, who would start on NXT but with main roster money. None of this came to pass, but the wrestlers not signing the deal was the only way that WWE couldn't win. Even if they'd had a Rumble to Mania run and decided against sticking around, the damage to their collective credibility would have surely put an end to the second promotion blossoming, and likely would have hobbled the independents that had risen amidst their success writ large. Alas, the game found himself in a situation he couldn't win for a change. It was time to get used to that for him as well. Number 11. NXT lost the Wednesday Night War. Recent enough that very little needs relitigating, but far enough into the past that those viewing the current landscape of the industry might not believe it, Triple H's black and gold baby was absolutely destroyed by AEW in a ratings war created by WWE to try and limit their new rival's success straight out the gate. It did not work, and when going head-to-head with AEW Dynamite, NXT beat it in the key 18 to 49 demographic on precisely one occasion. But in one respect, the plan worked. Audiences were divided, so AEW undoubtedly lost some viewers to the action on the other channel, but the weekly ratings war painted a damning picture of how few people that accounted for. In truth, Hunter was out of creative energy anyway. NXT had already reached its apex that previous April at TakeOver New York in Brooklyn. The last thing it needed was an energized competition making it look as dated and tired as it actually was, but Triple H was still very much at the whims of his father-in-law back then, and said whims were remarkably familiar. The pandemic scorched what buzz might have remained around NXT, not least because of NXT's incredible handling of the enforced circumstances just a year into its existence. A long, drawn-out head-to-head battle continued well into 2021, but the war was already over by the time the pandemic took hold. NXT's extended stay on Wednesday nights concluded that April, and by September, a post-cardiac event, Paul Levesque had to look on from the sidelines as the entire brand was rebadged to revitalize it after the bruising perception and optics bludgeoning. Number 10. Chyna's Hall of Fame induction, or lack thereof. In 2019, D-Generation X went into the WWE Hall of Fame. As part of this, the late great Chyna was posthumously inducted and paid tribute to by the surviving members, drawing an enormous response from the crowd in the process. The Ninth Wonder of the World was a worthy nickname, and fans were keen to make that explicitly clear to those within the company that oversaw her meteoric rise and brutal fall. 4 years earlier, when Chyna was still alive, Triple H suggested that this might never be possible. Speaking on Stone Cold Steve Austin's WWE Network podcast, Triple H suggested that by raising Chyna's profile, he and/or WWE may be responsible for younger fans, including his own children, going online and finding out that Chyna once made a living, amongst other numerous things, from pornography. It reeked of hypocrisy, sexism, and multiple other things at the top of the organisation that they'd been guilty of for generations, and was a rather feckless rationale for simply not wanting any other stories that might find a way to crop back up. Life happens, and Triple H and Stephanie McMahon's on-screen relationship morphing into a romantic one at the expense of Hunter and Chyna's kicked off a bleak chapter in the real life of Joanie Laurer. It was quite possibly that door that the game didn't want to open again before 2016, and when Chyna tragically passed before she could accept the induction and the plaudits herself, any further solo induction will likely be tinged with the tragic air of what might have been. Number 9. His boring Hall of Fame speech. Triple H has plastered himself all over WWE's modern boom period, and to be absolutely fair to somebody who always wants to have his belly rubbed anyway, why wouldn't he? Wrestling fans remember a lot, but the business itself persistently forgets. CM Punk has often discussed being a spoke in the wheel, and wrestling's capitalistic wheels never stop turning. Not since Bill Watts got less than 1 month in the spot in 1995 has a head of creative's role been more precarious either. TKO will presumably judge the game based on results and graphs. And if they ever start pointing in the wrong way, this guy's just middle management. They could point him all the way out the door if they wanted. And based on looping rumors about how happy TKO really are with WWE, the company might even get sold before Triple H even has his chance to get his feet any further under the table. This at least explains why he was the main event of his own Legends Night in 2025. Hunter's grandstanding has made political sense right up to and including putting himself in the Hall of Fame over WrestleMania 41 weekend, which he then pretended that Shawn Michaels did. It was really bizarre. Unfortunately, some high-profile colleagues and/or subordinates could only stomach his stories up to a certain point. Like many of his matches at WrestleMania, the speech went long and all too close to putting those in attendance to sleep. Booker T appeared to have nodded off at one point. Becky Lynch, Bayley, and The Miz could be seen barely holding it together like teenagers in Friday afternoon double maths, and several superstars who smartly wore sunglasses inside were thought to have done so to potentially hide their own ability to survive the game's latest play. Number 8. Body shaming Chris Masters. Oh boy, DX in 2006, the era when comedy meant crotch chops, bad poop jokes, and Hunter burying whoever was unlucky enough to be in a segment with him. Case in point, Chris Masters. So picture this, DX are bantering with Eric Bischoff, who is there to plug his autobiography, and a young Chris Masters gets a line in. He says that he's planning to write a book as well. Nice, pretty harmless line, right? Wrong, because Triple H just can't help himself. Cue the punchline, what are you gonna call it? How to lose 50 pounds in 4 weeks? The crowd roared, sick burn, bro. Except here's the problem, it wasn't really a joke. Masters had failed a wellness test, that's why he was smaller. And when he was big, well, that was his whole gimmick. He was that huge because his job required it. Hunter knew this, obviously, but Hunter knew that he could also say whatever the hell he wanted because he was untouchable. No consequences, no abandoned push, no slap on the wrist, just a guy in power punching down at somebody who wasn't. A bully. Number 7. His video game insecurity. In 2008, a confidential memo from WWE and SmackDown vs. Raw video game developers THQ was leaked ahead of the newest version of the game, and it made an extremely peculiar edict very clear. In any clips and images posted in reviews, Triple H must not be, and I quote, put in a defenseless or vulnerable position. Funny and lame. Funny and lame that real-life wrestlers had been in a vulnerable or defenseless position working real-life matches against Triple H for nearly a decade by this point, and they still weren't allowed to get a lick in on him, even in video game form. This level of character protection was unusual considering that no other wrestler, be it John Cena, Randy Orton, or even Hunter's best and longest tenured pal Shawn Michaels, got that same kind of concession. From the reports, there was no information on whether a stipulation could be added to matches featuring Hunter that forced him to wrap it up before people got bored, because that too would be quite hard to illustrate in screenshots. To many fans and critics, the leaked message validated long-standing accusations of Triple H being insecure to a comical degree, and constantly guilty of using his political power to maintain an image of dominance that other stars were never allowed. Number 6. Just how long it took to get him to the top. To ask Triple H, you'd think that the Attitude Era and the runaway success of WWE from 1997 through to WCW's closure in 2001 was down to Stone Cold Steve Austin, The Rock, and Triple H. This rules out several enormously important people who will get their due plaudits shortly, but this line of nonsense is doubly dubious beyond the game putting himself in the bracket with the actual top guys. He wasn't just on the tier below Rock and Austin, but he was also years behind them, in the top of the roster rat race. As far back as 1997, Hunter and Rock were part of Shawn Michaels and Bret Hart's political war as their respective locker room protégés. Considering who won that particular turf war and Rocky Maivaia's abysmal start to life, it was something of a shock when Nation member Rock had lapped Hunter 1 year later. The two went to war over the Intercontinental title in much the same way as Michaels and Hart in 1992, and yet again mirroring that pairing. One of them lost upwards to the world title, and the other stayed secondary. You can figure out which one's which. After Triple H couldn't hold a candle to Austin as a babyface in 1998, he turned heel on DX in 99, right in time for Rock switching sides and doing just fine sharing the top spot with the Rattlesnake. When fans didn't buy the game as the top bad guy, he reunited DX as his own goons, adopted a work-shoot attitude in his promos, and pinned just about every wrestler alive in moves that were designed to force you into accepting him as the man. And if you're looking for examples, here we go. Number 5. Just how many people it took to get him to the top. At Royal Rumble 2000, Mick Foley was left staring at the Madison Square Garden lights at the climax of an incredible match with Triple H. Mick is lucky he can see anything at all given how close the drawing pin sticking out of his head was to his eyeball. Foley, as the psychotic Cactus Jack, had survived a pedigree following a brutal street fight, but only because Foley called an audible and rolled his shoulder at 2 so that Hunter could plant him in the tacks. Perhaps that little bit of improv was what really soured Paul Levesque on the hardcore legend in later years, because there must be some reason he doesn't publicly thank him every single day. Foley made Hunter, but it wasn't for the want of many others trying in 1999. Mick lost the WWE Championship to him the night after SummerSlam 1999 because Steve Austin didn't see the game as a top star. But even he did the honors in October, as did The Rock in 1999 and 2000, more times than any normal main eventer could have sustained. In a preposterous build for an Unforgiven six-pack match that he won, Triple H beat Mankind, The Rock, and Kane in separate matches on a deranged episode of SmackDown. He beat Vince McMahon and corrupted his daughter on the same night in the main event of Armageddon 99. He dethroned The Big Show for the WWE Championship on a January Raw like it was nothing, as part of an ownership story for the new happy couple. Triple H could not be stopped, and he still wasn't that damn good, nor bought into as the company's newest star. From an in-ring point of view, the growth in confidence afforded to him by the wins over Foley gave him the security to work his way up to the spot and argue his status as the very best in the industry by the summer of 2000. It was as good as Triple H ever got, and when he returned hyperinflated in 2002 after months on the shelf with a torn quad, he appeared to know it as well. So, it was time to stack up a few more wins. Number 4. Just how many people it took to keep him at the top. The so-called Reign of Terror, Triple H's stranglehold on Raw's main event scene from 2002 to 2005, was not exaggerated. It was exactly as miserable as people remember, and nostalgia will only polish it up if you're into Stockholm Syndrome. Fans joke about those 20 and 30-minute Hunter promos that opened up every episode of Raw, and sure, sometimes they were shorter, but they felt like an eternity, because even in 5 minutes, this guy could cram in enough self-indulgent bluster to make you wish that WCW was the company that survived the Monday Night Wars. The stories? Forget them. They were less about drama and more about Hunter flexing his political muscle. Investing in the fiction felt pointless because at the end, the outcome was always the same. Triple H wins, everybody else loses. Just look at the body count. Rob Van Dam unified 3 mid-card belts just to get fed to Triple H. Scott Steiner signed a big deal only to stink up pay-per-views so badly that he didn't even sniff WrestleMania. Booker T? We'll get to that disaster later on. Kevin Nash? Endless slugs with his buddy, but never a win. Goldberg? Lost his aura in the Elimination Chamber, then got his token victory before Hunter inevitably reclaimed the belt. 2004 wasn't any kinder either. After finally putting over Chris Benoit, Hunter went straight back to clipping the legs of anybody with potential, including Randy Orton, Edge, and Shelton Benjamin. Just pick a name. And surprise, surprise, he ended the year champion again. Only Batista finally broke the cycle, but until then, it was all Hunter, all the time, and nobody wanted it. Number 3. He didn't read the Vince McMahon case. The now dead WWE press conferences were just a grenade waiting to go off in the company's face, which is why they held such tight control over who could be trusted not to pull the pin. For certain people in those rooms, Triple H was giving them everything just by gracing them with his wonderful presence. His dry stat reads existed mostly so he could flex about the success of WWE, and the rest was mostly about the game through the eyes of the fans turned press. Typical questions included, do you want to wrestle Taylor Swift? Should Bad Bunny join the Judgment Day? And why are you so great? Until at least one journalist occasionally addressed the elephant in every WWE room. Whatever preparation went on between Paul Levesque and his team was not enough. At the Royal Rumble 2024 scrum, the chief content officer was asked about the sex trafficking lawsuit filed by Janelle Grant against WWE and Vince McMahon and then John Laurinaitis, not anymore, just days earlier. Fans and analysts alike were still coming to terms with just how horrific the allegations in the weighty suit were, but not Paul Levesque. The rebuffing that day was pretty awkward, but it was oddly overshadowed by his inadvertent stumbling burial of the media when he was pressed for more details on the nature of Drew Gulak's controversial release at the Backlash 2024 presser. For a man who spent half his career appearing to have all the answers, he continues to hate it when people change, or at least ask, the questions. Number 2. The racism. Because it's not a singular incident, angle, or promo. It would be one thing to lean on something as serious as the 1998 Nation of Domination parody promo cut by DX in blackface, but there would be those arguing that a value judgment made in the present doesn't fully respect some of the deeply flawed values of the past. It would be another, and a massive one at that, to reference the infamously terrible build to WrestleMania and that match with Booker T. This wasn't about promos, story beats, and the end payoff aging badly, but acts and gestures that were chastised for unacceptable prejudices. The time it took the game to make the cover at the end of the show has somehow become the story rather than how they got here, which is actually quite lucky if your name's Paul Levesque. It would be another thing to highlight the use of the Iron Cross in Triple H's iconography for decades. It would be even more to highlight the bigoted microaggressions that have resurfaced time and time again. These patterns repeat themselves. It is not something that he has shaken off. As the singular creative force there to take the blame from 2022 onwards, Triple H is yet to receive significant pushback for one of his favourite but somewhat questionable booking techniques, that being grouping people of similar ethnic backgrounds into teams and stables, which he does all the time. The hypothesis is imperfect because, yeah, of course there are going to be groups where some overlaps occur, as there should be at a bare minimum, but that there's once again enough examples surrounding the accusation is problematic enough. Not that Triple H sees it that way. Number 1, he doesn't see colour. After 2+ years running press events as PLE post-shows, it was during the Bad Blood 2024 scrum that Triple H was finally put on the spot about the lack of diversity on the monthly shows by TJ Legacy of Soapbox Run the Ropes, who noted lots of discussion about that very topic in the run-up. Not for the first time, Triple H thought he had all the answers, but instead delivered one of the worst possible answers when he said, I don't see the difference in anybody. I don't see the color. I don't see the nationality. I don't see any of it. I just see talent. I don't see the difference between men and women. I see talent. The start of his comment was immediately picked up on social media, with multiple accounts coming forward to express exactly why it was wrong and a totally dumb approach. If you contrast this to Cody Rhodes, who spoke on the subject 5 years earlier when asked by Mark Henry, and he said, I told Brandy one time that I don't see colour, and she said, well, then you don't see my experience. Going on to foreshadow some of the waffle spouted by Nick Khan in his own pushbacks months later, Hunter doubled down, noting, I don't keep track of any of that. I do what's relevant and what is best and what is being delivered by the best. That's what goes. No different than the men and women who main event. Whatever the biggest stories are, that's where we go. But fans online are still keeping track, and Triple H's remarks were just about the last way of deflecting them.